Welcome back, City Builders. CodiakTheKodiak here. Today, in collaboration with Paradox Interactive, we'll be going through everything that's included in the new Bridges and Ports DLC. Now, while I have early access today, everything will be publicly available on October 29th. From a new resource and industry, to new maps, and all the new content that's included. Since I'm partnering with Paradox Interactive today, at the top of my description will be a referral link. I don't earn any commission or anything off of that link. It just lets them know that I sent you. Now, over 75% of you who watched my last video were not subscribed. So before we get started, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and do not forget to turn on notifications so you can keep up to date with all the Cities Skylines II news, tips, and tricks. Without further ado, let's get started. Strap in because there is quite a lot of new content. Now, this is everything that's included in the Bridges and Ports DLC, all of the new assets and items. Now, I've already kind of talked about how these will function, specifically the bridges as well as the ports, and maybe some situations where you want to utilize the port stuff inland to make dry harbors, or a more customizable rail yard in my previous two videos. You can find a link to both of those down in the description of this video. Or you can take a look at my Bridges and Ports playlist up in the annotations right now. First up, we're gonna be starting off with the movable bridges, and there are 10 new ones. Here they all are on screen. I kind of have them evenly spaced apart, and each one is about 15 meters above the ground. We're gonna go through each one by one. So this first bridge right here is the 2-lane drawbridge, which you can find under the small roads menu. Next up is the 4-lane drawbridge, which you can find under the medium roads. This is the bright yellow one. I know some people have some pretty hotly contested opinions about how bright and yellow it is. I actually think this one would look really good on a winter-themed map. I've also never been on a drawbridge where there's these actual dividers between the lanes on the bridge, or I've never really been on a bridge that's had that at all. So I find that also really interesting and unique. Next up is the 6-lane drawbridge, and I really like the brick aesthetic to this. I think it looks absolutely great. It's very well modeled. I'm a big fan of this one right here, especially with these little end turrets on the side. Oh my gosh, I think they look so good. Now, these are the 3 road exclusive drawbridges, and before I forget, look at the pillars on the 6-lane one. I really like this building a lot. But there's also one more road drawbridge, and that is this behemoth over here. Now, this is the 4-lane highway, double train track, double-decked lift bridge. You can find this one under the highway tab, and it is definitely really unique and interesting looking. I actually really like this cone shape that they kind of have here, this half circle kind of, and then you can see the actual train line is down here underneath, and we have the road on top. I know we highlighted this one in the developer diary because they used one of the frames for it. It is definitely a really interesting looking building. Just look at these massive wheels designed to help lift the bridge as boats come through. Now, the next 3 are for other modes of transit. This one right here is the 2-way train track lift bridge. We also saw this one in the developer diaries in the trailers for those, the feature highlight videos. It's definitely very industrial. You can see here that the train line goes right here. We have the bumpers for the boats just in case they drift a little too close, and it definitely looks really industrial and super nice. After that, we have the double tram track lift bridge. This is for trams, obviously, right here. It's blue. I mean, it looks nice. I have no complaints with it. And then finally, we have the double subway track lift bridge. It's definitely a little bit more modern, minimalist in a way. It's very nice. I also like this one as well. Again, I have all of these bridges sitting at about 15 meters above buildable height, so I put it at 15 meters and built the bridges across the water. Finally, we have our 2 pedestrian bridges right here. The first one is a cable-stayed pedestrian drawbridge pathway, which you can see right here. This one actually reminds me of the bridge that's in Tempesta in Finland when we went to meet the developers of City Skylines. Finally, probably the most interesting looking bridge of the bunch is the pedestrian bascule bridge. I think that's how it's pronounced, and you can see that this is definitely designed to lift the bridges up. They look like these massive industrial motors. They're super cool and definitely incredibly unique. Now, obviously, all of these bridges also can just be placed over water, and in order to create this lift function, you do have to create a narrow waterway underneath the bridge. However, you can just place the bridges on their own, and they all look slightly different than their regular variants or counterparts, for example. So if you want to add a little bit more variety, you can just place these bridges to get some extra bridge variety across your city. All right, now that we're done with the movable bridges, let's move on to the new 2 double-decked bridges. Once again, I'm placing them at about 15 meters above the water, and they're roughly the same length, about 600 meters long. This is the span that it will create at 600 meters long. So the first bridge is going to be the 2-lane plus 4-lane double-decked extra dosed bridge, and you can find this one under the medium road. So you can see there's a 4-lane road down here and a 2-lane road up top. There's also pedestrian walkways along the sides, so you can keep your pedestrians safe. This bridge is absolutely gorgeous. I love these single pillar like suspension bridges. I really like the way that these look. I think they're absolutely gorgeous. Now, next up, we have the 3-lane highway double-deck suspension bridge, which you will obviously find under the highways category. It's definitely an incredibly unique suspension bridge right here, and we can see that we have 2 layers to the highway, one going this way and one going that way. One interesting thing is that it does actually arch the road, so it's not like flat bridge span. The road is actually arched along with the suspension, so as it reaches this middle point, there is a arch to the actual road itself, so something to keep in mind visually. Okay, next up are all of the regular bridges. So these are all of the normal bridges that don't have any moving parts or double-decked. However, they are visually distinct and unique. I have all of these bridges placed at 30 meters up, and they're all about 600 meters length, except for this one bridge right here, which you can kind of see is a bit longer because it won't let me place a bridge that short with that style. So that one is 800 meters long. First up, we have the 2-lane suspension bridge under small roads. I feel like this would look really good with the, the Grand Bridge asset that is included in the game. When I see bridges that look like this, I think Gotham, I think New York City even. I think that this just really fits that era of bridge building, really. Next up, under the medium roads, we have the 4-lane truss arch bridge, which looks exactly as it sounds. It's a 4-lane truss arch bridge. It kind of reminds me of the 1 truss arch bridge that's in Grand Theft Auto. It reminds me of something that you would drive up, you know, except it's a little bit less angular, more rounded. I feel like if this was in a game like that, I would want to drive a bicycle up that so badly, or a motorcycle. After that, also under the medium roads is the 4-lane extra dosed bridge. And you can see here, kind of looks like one of those magnet things that you kind of like hit, or like there's like an instrument that kind of looks like this. If you guys know what I'm talking about, let me know down in the comments below. But it kind of looks like that with some suspension cables coming off the side of it. I think it looks really nice, and it's definitely unique. All these bridges are very unique and will add some distinction to your cities. Next up is the Long Boy, and this one is under large roads, and it is the 6-lane suspension bridge. Definitely reminds me a little bit of the Mackinac Bridge here in Michigan, or maybe even the Golden Gate Bridge, for that matter. It just reminds me of the classic suspension bridge look that I'm used to seeing. And again, be mindful that this one specifically, they do not allow you to build too short. So you do need to make sure that this one has a long span available. Now, both of these 2 bridges, so the 4-lane one-way extra dose bridge and the 6-lane suspension bridge, also have one-way variants. I didn't put them down, but there is one-way versions of these roads as well. Next up is the double subway track truss arch bridge, obviously under the subway category here. And yeah, it's exactly what it says. I think this bridge looks super cool. It kind of reminds me of like a roller coaster in a way. I think this one's really unique, and I'm a big fan of it. Finally is a bridge that probably shouldn't be 30 meters above the ground. And honestly, I'm a little disappointed by this one. This is the wooden covered pedestrian bridge under the pathways. I don't particularly love that it's gray. Now I've placed this down. This obviously isn't new, but this is just the regular like 2-lane, 2-way like wooden bridge. And I kind of feel the same way about both of these buildings, that I don't particularly love that they're like white or gray. I wish they were more of a wood color to highlight the fact that they are wooden bridges. However, this one would be really unique, maybe as a pier asset or some kind. I do like the canopy. I like the actual design of it. I really just wish that they were wood colored and not some kind of painted over structure, which, albeit a lot of times they do paint over these, so that way the wood maintains a bit more of its structure. But again, the whiteness just kind of makes it feel a little devoid and sterile. Now, if you previously remember, they did in fact add keys to the base game, and with this update comes a bunch of new variations. So first off, these are 2 medium keys with driving lanes. We have 2 different variations here. This one over here on the left has a shallow ribbon, and the one on the right has a bit deeper of one. Now, next up are the 2 wide keys with driving lanes. These are under the medium roads. They're basically the same as the previous, just with 4 lanes. Now, next up are the two new pedestrian keys. These are both under the pathways category. Once again, we have both of them here. One's narrow and one's wide with pedestrian paths. They both have the deep ribbon effect to them as well. This one, the narrow one can be a little tricky to place. I've had some trouble placing it, so just keep that in mind when you go to place that one, that it can be a little bit more of a challenge than the wide one. Finally, there's also the port key, which obviously belongs with the port's stuff under the port's transportation menu for water, but do keep in mind that this is a new key that you can use inside of your ports. Okay, welcome to my madness here. This is how I built everything to show off to you guys everything related to the ports and industrial side of this DLC. Now, let's start off with the transportation side of it with ferries. So first off, they've added ferries to the game. Right here, you can take a look at the new ferry depot. So the ferry depot fuels, maintains, and stores ferries. Each vehicle stop at the depot in a certain interval to stay in running order. It can also be upgraded to have an extra hull, so this is what it looks like normally, and then we can add the extra hull to the side here so even more ferries can spawn out of it. Now with the extra hull, it adds 30 ferries to the line. However, if we delete that one, it's only 20, so it does add 10 extra. The building has 42 employees and only produces a low amount of noise pollution. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can go about it with ferries. First off, we'll go under the transportation tab and go to ferries, which is where you can find all these buildings, including the depot that I just mentioned. So there's clearly 6 different things we can place. The first one is a ferry stop shoreline. Right here it says ferry stop featuring a small gate and a pier, requires a shoreline placement. Now I've actually placed that one over here and it kind of just looks like a regular bus stop, but obviously for ferries. You can see they get the ticket kiosks kind of over there and the times for the ferries to come through and a bunch of covered benches for people to sit and wait. Next up is a ferry stop key. A ferry stop featuring a small gate and a pier. It requires a key placement. So I've actually placed it right here on one of the keys I've already showed off to you guys. And you can see it kind of just hangs off the edge of the pier. It's definitely really nice. I actually really like how the functionality works, and it seems very seamless. Now, next up are the normal ferry terminals. This is a terminal for ferries that allows passengers ferry boarding and disembarking. The terminal is complete with a ferry terminal pier, allowing for ferries to dock at the terminal. It can also be upgraded with the bus terminal. So I've actually placed one right here. So this is what it will look like when you first get it. And then all you have to do is attach a dock to it. When you attach the dock to it, as we click on the building and go to the ferry terminal pier upgrade, it allows for you to build out your dock and have ferries actually come in. Now, the longer you make it, the more stops you can actually have on the dock, which obviously makes sense. The building itself is pretty nice too. It looks like it has a little cafeteria sitting area up over here with ticket kiosks. I think the assets in this pack, generally speaking, are fantastic looking. It looks like they really took a good amount of time. All that time it took for this DLC to come out, it feels like the people making the assets inside of Colossal Order spent that entire time actually making really high quality assets, which I'm super grateful for because they look absolutely fantastic. Now you may see there's also a bus terminal unique upgrade, an integrated bus station that allows the direct bus traffic to and from the ferry terminal. It adds 3 bus platforms, and I've actually added that over here to this one so you can see how it looks a little different. It gets rid of that parking lot and adds the bus terminals instead. You can also see the ferries kind of come in and out here as the ferries will dip and bobble as they come through on the ferry line. Now, just like all other transportation methods, you will need to go and create your ferry lines, just like any other transportation method, and you do need to build narrow boat lays. These are narrow sea lanes where boats can operate. Very specifically, the ferries. The ferries do need, it can at least handle the smallest of boatways for the ferries. They can also be on larger boatways, so just keep that in mind. Next up is one of the namesakes of the DLC, and that's ports. So these are all of the new port assets in the game. First though, we're gonna start off with all of the new port roads, which we can find over here. They're all in the actual transportation menu. So if we go down here to transportation, most of the stuff in this DLC is going to be specifically from the port side, and ferries is going to be in the transportation menu. And we go up here to water. So the actual water menu right here, and we go inside. So you'll see that there's the small port, the medium port, and the large port, which we'll get to in a minute. However, here are all of the roads. Now the ports have their own dedicated roads because those allow for the crate stackers to actually move on them. You can just use normal roads if you like. However, container cranes can only be placed along these port roads or port quays, and the passenger terminal can also only be placed on these roads as far as I know. So there's the 2-lane one-way port road. Then there's the 2-lane port road, which is obviously the 2-way variant. We have the 1-lane, one-way port gate road. These are specifically for the gates, but you can use them throughout the entirety of the port. There's also the 2-lane port gate road, which again is for the gates, and you'll see that all in a minute. Then we have the 2-lane one-way port gate road, the 3-lane asymmetrical port gate road, the 4-lane one-way port gate road, and then the port quay. Now, if you take a closer look here at these roads, you'll notice that the roads that have gate in the name don't actually have the yellow curbs and borders. So just keep that in mind when you're building, at least, that the ones that say gate don't actually have the curb here for the yellow trim. Also, the gate-specific roads do not allow you to place certain items on them as well, so keep that in mind, that the gate roads should primarily be used for the gates. However, you can zone on all of these too, so keep that in mind that you can use these a little bit more flexibly than you might think. Now here we are looking at all of the port assets themselves, and we're gonna go through each one by one. The first thing we're gonna start with is the most important, however, and that's the gates themselves. So first off, we have the small port gate. This is the main gate to your port area. It features a small office and a vehicle inspection area for incoming and outgoing traffic. The port area is complete with container cranes, warehouses, container yards, tank farms, or storage yards, intermodal train terminals, passenger ship terminals, employee canteens, port security, and emergency response services, as well as auxiliary gates. There's a lot included here. Now, the info view on the left kind of contains literally everything you might need to see. So it tells you what buildings are inside of your port, how many employees, what's stored inside, how much storage you have, the noise pollution, the vehicle maintenance, everything you want to know about your port is inside of this little window. Also, in order to add any of the port upgrades, this again is kind of similar to the Parks DLC, but definitely a little bit more confusing. I wish there was like a dedicated button for adding this stuff on the bottom bar rather than actually clicking on the port itself. But in order to add any upgrade to your port, you have to click on the main gate building. And be careful not to click on the roads, because sometimes you can actually click on the roads instead, and obviously that will lead to you not actually clicking on the port building and getting your upgrade menu. So you do actually have to click on the main building in order to get access to all of your upgrades. So obviously right here is the port small gate, and it definitely looks like a small gate access to a port. You have your main little like security booth right here along with the gates. There's also 2 auxiliary gates. So we have the small auxiliary port gate and the medium auxiliary port gate. That just allow you to have different access points to your port. We kind of covered some more details about ports in the previous dev diary videos, so please make sure you go back and watch those. Now, the small port gate can handle every single building inside of the ports. However, there are some exclusive upgrades that can only be added to the medium and large port gates. Next up is the medium port. Now, as you can see, the medium port is definitely bigger. It can handle more traffic, and it has 2 main things of entry here versus the small port gate, which only has 1 road of entry. However, this can be upgraded with a customs office. So as you can see here, the building looks slightly different. It looks a little bigger, and there is definitely some more security throughout here to actually scan and protect the cargo coming in and out, or at least make sure there's nothing troubling coming through. You can see up here on the top left that it has plus 2% import cost citywide, minus 2% export costs, citywide, and minus 3 crime rate within 1 kilometer when you add that upgrade. Finally, the last port gate is the large port gate, and as you can see here, there's 4 entrance lanes for this one. As you can see, this building is much bigger, it has many more lanes. It just makes sense, it's just a larger port gate, really. But as we move on here to a different version of it, this one has the customs office. So much like the previous one, this one also has maybe some metal detectors or something over here, some x-ray scanners to actually go through the cargo in the back here, and it adds the 2nd floor to the building. However, that's not the only upgrade the large port gate can have. The large port gate can also have an exclusive upgrade, and that one is the reach stacker garage. This adds space for several additional reach stackers to allow for faster cargo handling throughout your port. You guys will see those kind of driving around your port, and this just adds for more and faster use of those. As you can see, here is the garage back over here, and when you combine them all together, this is what the large port will look like fully upgraded. with a second floor to this building and a garage back over here. Now let's take a look at every building that can be added to your port. I placed them all kind of connected to the small port over here, but first we're going to start at the intermodal train station. The intermodal train terminal, The intermodal train terminal enhances cargo transportation and handling by allowing reach stackers to transfer containers directly between ships and trains. Basically, it's the cargo harbor, but customizable. It looks exactly how you think it would, and it functions exactly how you think it does. Now I'm getting a little warning right here that says I'm bypassing the gate because I have it placed outside of the port area, but it's just a little too big for how I have things laid out, so I place it out over here. You will get that warning if something bypasses the gate, just so you're aware. This severely reduces the efficiency of your port. Next up is the employee canteen, a place for workers to rest, enjoy a meal, or a cup of coffee between shifts, which will increase the employee happiness of your port. After that is the port security, a base of operations for port security. Their presence deters criminal activity in the vicinity of the port area. After that, we have our emergency response, a base of operations for emergency response. They oversee fire safety in the vicinity of the port area. So if you look at these three buildings here, you can see the canteen does just kind of look like a bit of a longhouse canteen, exactly what you would probably think one would look like maybe inside of a port area. Now, not the same thing could be said for the port security. It definitely has a little bit more of a modern aesthetic to it. Finally, the emergency response building kind of has the similar look to the actual port security, where it kind of has a bit more of a modern look to it, but they do kind of give a containery vibe. Next up is the first of our storage buildings, which is the small cargo container yard. A small cargo container yard where cargo trucks from the city deliver and collect resources. This contains or at least can store up to 3,000 tons. After that, we can go over now to the medium cargo container yard, which has the same description but stores 5,000 tons. And then finally, we have the large cargo container yard, which again has the same description but can store up to 10,000 tons of resources. Before we move on to the different container yards, I will flash a graphic up on screen right now that explains which building stores which type of resource. And we went over that more in depth in our developer diary video. Now, next up is the small cargo warehouse, which kind of has a similar description. And if you looked at the graphic on screen, it tells you what it's going to be storing. This can store 5,000 tons of goods, has these nice loading ramps too. It's a pretty nice asset. After that, we have the medium cargo warehouse. All of these names are so long and they're killing me slowly. But it's just a longer version of the building, and this holds 7.5 kilotons. And then after that is the large cargo warehouse, which stores 15,000 tons. Once again, this is just a much larger version of the previous variants. Now, after that is a more unique building. We have the small tank farm, which again, if you looked up on screen, is mostly storing liquids. However, something I noticed is that it's giving me exclusively this round barrel variant. It might be because I'm on the European theme here too. But if I go to, like, let's say destroy the building, it flashes a round barrel variant. And we saw that in the developer diary. So I'm not sure if this is just the North American storage and this is the European storage, but it refuses to give me this variant. So keep in mind that if yours looks a little different, it's probably due to that. Now, the small tank farm can hold 25 tons of fluids. The medium one can hold 3 tons. And the large can hold 3.75, which is definitely interesting. It's definitely not that much more from the larger one, but if you look, the larger one definitely doesn't have that many more storage containers. It only really has 3 extra. So the scaling between medium and large is not that significant. After that, we have our bulk storage yards. These store just raw ore, basically, and it's a small storage yard where cargo trucks from the city can deliver and collect resources. Again, it's the same description, but this holds 1.72 kilotons. I think it's definitely interesting that it's like in a fraction amount, basically, or we have decimals that aren't in intervals of 5. The building is also very cool. I love the actual conveyor belt system that's kind of going on there. I think this looks really nice. We also have the medium bulk one, which holds 8.6. And then finally, we have the large one, which holds 34.4 thousand tons of raw resources. And we can see as this grows up a bit, it adds more buildings. This one adds silos, and we have the conveyor belt running through here. I really like the way these buildings look. Now, something really important to keep in mind with these storage buildings over here in the port is that not all of them are placed exactly the same. So if you kind of look here at the container yards and the warehouses, the side that is the longest is the side that you place on the road. However, with the bulk storage yard, the shorter side is the one that actually gets placed on the road. So keep that in mind when you're doing your road placement, that you will have to consider which side's the accessible side for the buildings. Now over here are some that I've placed outside the port area because you actually don't have to place these ones specifically inside the port area. These are your storage yards, and you'll actually find them under different tabs. Rather than clicking on the port building itself, you can go into here and then under road, where we can find things like the bus station, we can find the small storage yard, which allows you to build these storage facilities throughout your city. You don't have to place them inside the port. So if you want to store a large amount of resources in a specific spot of your city, you can place these instead. So right here is the small storage yard, a small storage yard where cargo trucks from the city deliver and collect resources. Again, has the same description. This one can store up to 3,000 tons. The next one can store up to 7,500 tons, and the final one can store 1,500 tons. The interesting thing about these ones is that it looks like they can store all types of resources that aren't fluid. So it can store coal, it can store wood, it can store pharmaceuticals, crude oil, but it doesn't look like it can store things like food, for example. So while there's no graphic covering these ones specifically, keep in mind which resources that these things actually store. Now finally, here are the coastal buildings, the things that actually add to your ports to make them a wet port. So right here we have the passenger terminal, which allows passenger ships to load and unload. A passenger terminal allows passengers to board and disembark. Requires placement on a port quay or a port road. Right here, you can kind of see it right here. I have it on the quay, and it adds these nice little yellow bumpers to the port quay as well. Now finally are the two container cranes. So we have the regular container crane and the striped container crane. I don't believe there's any difference between them other than the aesthetics. The one looks smaller, but functionally I believe they are the same. I can't find anything that would make them any different. They cost the same, they have the same description. One just looks bigger than the other. They also have these tracks so they can move along and grab the cargo that they need from different parts of the ship. I really like all the little details they've added. Obviously, it makes it feel more realistic, and it is more realistic that way, but it just looks really nice. The ship-to-shore gantry crane moves cargo containers between the ship and shore. Reach stackers handle the cargo containers between the container cranes and storage areas within the cargo port. It requires placement on a port quay or a port road. And here's the larger striped variant. Now that's everything included in the ports themselves. However, we do have an entirely new industry being added to the game, and that is fishing. Now right here is the inland fishing farm. In order to access it, you go down to your zones over here and you go to your specialized industry. You can see that there's 2 inland fishing farms, and there's also offshore oil drilling, which we'll get to in a little bit. Now my inland fishing farm does not actually have any inland fishing farm pods because this is not a real city. There's nothing here. It's just a blank map. So I'll put up on screen right now from the trailer, or maybe the dev diary, I don't remember which one it was, where there is some footage of the actual fish farm. It functions much like the farms. I don't love how it just generally populates the buildings. I can't imagine that long term this is how this will function, but that's how it looks right now. Much like the regular farms or any of the extractor things, I just can't imagine that it's just intended to auto-populate these buildings that have random pathways into nowhere. Now the description is the inland fishing farm is a specialized industry that can be set up anywhere to produce fish. Now, once you place the building, you draw it out like a normal farm, and then you can click on the building and add 3 different types of storage. Now you can do this for both the inland fish farm as well as the offshore ones. So first off, we have the small cold storage, which adds 20 tons of fish storage. We have the medium cold storage as well as the large. So if we want to see what those look like, here is the small, here is the medium, and here is the large, but you do have to place it in the distance, so we'll place it over there. And there we go. So here are our 3 buildings. You can see these storage containers outside, a little spiral staircase. They look a little bland coastal buildings. I think they look really simple. Some modular warehouses. I think they look really nice. Now, way out here over in the middle of La La Land is my fishing and open water fish farm. Now, the fishing and open water fish farms are a specialized industry that can be set up on open water areas. Fishing requires a high fish population to yield fish, but fish farms can produce fish regardless of the population level. So it's telling you if you want to build this building, keep in mind that what the fish farms are different and whether or not open fishing is maybe a better option. So if we exit out of that and we click on the building itself here, we can notice that there is a bunch of different upgrades. Now, obviously they have access to the same cold storages, and they also have access to the narrow boatway, much like the ferries do. So what we do is we build a fishing harbor pier, much like with ferries, which draws out the pier. Adds 3 different access points on each side, depending on how long it is. It might add up to 6 or 7, but each side has their own little unique pier access point. So now, as you can see, I've drawn some routes here with the new fishing route tool, and there's 2 different fishing areas. So we have your regular fishing area, which you can see I've placed actually over here. So this is the regular fishing area. When you click on it, you get access to the new natural resource view with fish, which is bright blue. There is overfishing, so that is something important to be mindful of. And then we also have the open water fish farm area, which looks like the fish is in jail based on the black and white stripes. That one will appear over here, and I'll also flash a graphic up on screen, or at least some screenshot that includes some actual visual of the fish farms themselves. Since this is a dead city, you're not really gonna see that, but you can see I've drawn my routes here using the fishing route tool to and from the different areas, and that's basically it. It'll start spawning boats, and they'll start fishing. Now, finally, under this same specialization tab, we also now have access to offshore drilling. The offshore drilling specialized industry can be set up on underwater natural oil deposits to produce crude oil. Includes built-in oil pipeline connection nodes. So if we place this building right here, which we can see looks like this, we can click on it and see all of our upgrades. So if we want to start with storage first, there is 3 different storage options. There's the small tank oil farm, which we can place right here, the medium oil tank farm, which we can place right here, and then the large oil tank farm, which we can place right here. And if we look, we can see those variant barrels that I was talking about earlier are the small version. I think that's very interesting that it's giving us those here. Maybe it changes based on the actual resource stored. I'm not really too sure, to be quite honest. So the small one can store 30 tons, the medium can store 50, and the large can store 70. Again, you use the narrow seaway for this one as well. And you can see right here, there is the Oil Harbor Pier. So we can build that out just like we've done with everything else. And we can see it's gonna add some nice little platforms for us to utilize. So as we place that out, you can notice that there is definitely some pipelines that run through here and some access points as well. In the options here, we have the Compliant Tower Oil Platform. The Compliant Tower Oil Platform extracts and processes crude oil from rock formations beneath the seabed. Designed for shallow waters, it's stationed closer to the shoreline where it remains anchored to the ocean floor. It requires an oil pipe connection to the offshore oil drilling harbor for the transportation of crude oil to shore. But then we also have the semi-submersible oil platform. The semi-submersible oil platform is a specialized marine vessel that extracts and processes crude oil that is found in rock formations beneath the seabed. It's engineered for deeper waters. It's positioned farther from the shoreline, floating on partially submerged platoons. It requires an oil tanker route connected to the offshore oil drilling harbor for transporting crude oil to the shore. So the 2 different options here are the Compliant Oil Tower, which just allows it to pipe in, and then we also have the semi-submersible, which actually will ship the oil in using a tanker. So if we place the placeable one right here, we'll place it right at the end of the dock so we can just kind of ship the oil right in, and then we'll place this one out over here and actually create our little routes. So let's do that. So we'll create a route right here, boom and boom. This one can also have access to a route, I'm assuming for emergency purposes, that way a boat can get out there if need be, or maybe for employees, I'm not really too sure. But we can also go in here and select our, there it is. It's hard to sometimes get the snap points to work properly on this because you have to actually, like, you're thinking about placing it below it, right? You're not placing it on top of it. So once we click, we can click and drag it over to, again, we have to place it, make sure we place it deep below the actual oil platform there. And now that one is hooked up and we have oil access. So this oil will now be piped into the actual building itself and they'll be producing oil. However, for the offshore platform, we do need to make sure we're building that ship route. So we do have to go in here and do the oil tanker route and figure out where that is. So it's actually on the icon on this one rather than deep below it. We can go over here, create our little route, and then the tankers will come through and spawn if we had people inside of our map. Now that is everything related to industries in this DLC, but that's not everything that's actually included. There is also a bunch of new parks and lighthouses and other things. So let's move over to a different map and take a look at those. Okay, here we are in the other map, and this is basically everything else that's included inside of this DLC. We'll go through each thing one by one here, and the first thing we're gonna start with is the new placeable park buildings. So we're gonna ignore all of this wonderful clutter over this way. We're gonna start off with the new parks buildings. So the first thing we're gonna start off here are the new lighthouses. So we have the small lighthouse, the regular lighthouse, the large lighthouse, and then the old lighthouse being the biggest one. They all look really nice, and something that you'll actually notice while we're actually looking at all of these buildings is that there is a ton of color variations in a lot of these buildings. From the zonable buildings to the props to even these parks, there is a lot of different color changes that can actually happen to these buildings. So having a mod like Recolor might be incredibly helpful. I especially like this old lighthouse building. I think it looks super nice. I love the actual entrance to it with the little park placard at the bottom there, kind of explaining the park info. Maybe that's a hint to some future parks related stuff, or the parks related stuff that's actually going to be in this DLC, because there is almost a mini parks DLC inside of this one, as this includes 9 new large parks, all with unique pathing that you can connect up and make a larger interconnected park. In fact, almost all of them have a pathway at the exact same point on the upper part of the park, at least the back upper part of the park, where they can all kind of interconnect, and you can create a really nice tourist park area wherever you put your passenger harbor. So first off, we have this bouncy castle park, which adds 5 outdoor recreation. And as you can see, it contains a bouncy castle for all the kids to play in. Next up, we have the Merry Merry-Go-Round Carousel Park with a bunch of horses inside of it. Classic merry-go-round, adds 3 outdoor recreation. There is also a little petting zoo area as well. Next up is the Jet Set Jubilee Carousel Park, which has some cars and other vehicles inside of it as well. The next one is the Parkside Cafe, which has 2 outdoor recreation and has a little Parkside Cafe. Reminiscence of the Parks DLC, maybe. After that is the Park View Eatery, which adds +4 indoor recreation, which is definitely something that's a little different, and it also has an amphitheater stage for it as well. It kind of is very similar to the previous lot, but it definitely has different lot details to it. Same thing with the Pavilion Restaurant. It's the same layout, but different buildings. Next up is probably maybe even one of the more unique buildings in the entire game, and that's this haunted house park. Ghosts, ghouls, and goblins await just in time for Halloween too. A frightfully fun experience for the whole family. It adds +10 indoor recreation, and it even has these really cute, I wouldn't say cute necessarily, but they're coffins with skulls on them. Definitely one of the most, if not the most unique building in the game, I think. It has some cemetery assets to it. There's this little shrine out back. Super duper cool. I'm a huge fan of this one. Next up is the Old Ferris Ride Park, which features a vintage Ferris wheel, a much smaller Ferris wheel for a +5 outdoor recreation, and then obviously the Spin Vista Park, which is a modern Ferris wheel, much larger as we can see here. Definitely really cool, could look really cool by your ocean assets. Next up are 4 new commercial signature buildings. First up, we have Bait and Bistro, a laid-back waterfront eatery serving up the timeless fish and crab favorites with coastal charm. Now this one is under the North American theme. If we go into our signature buildings, you will have to actually go into the commercial tab and select North American in order for this one to pop up. This building adds +3% attractiveness citywide and +10 well-being within 1 kilometer. It definitely looks like a fishing wharf kind of eatery. I really like it. I think it looks really nice. Now, the European version of this asset, I guess, would be the Villa Mare. Maybe Via Mare. I'm not really too sure what the root language is in order for a correct pronunciation on this one, but a rustic motel with sun-bleached stone walls and quiet, sea-salted mornings. This is definitely a really cool asset. There's definitely some walkthroughs here on the archways. It feels like a Spanish Vista house. I really like it. I'm a big fan of this one too. I could also see someone utilizing this as maybe like a winery building or something like that, maybe to give you some more ideas for how to utilize these buildings in your cities. Next up is the Maritime Museum, and from the front, it just kind of looks like a boring building, but from the side, you can see that there is definitely some detail added to this one. It almost kind of reminds me of an aquarium, much less a maritime museum. Visitors embark on an immersive voyage that spans millennia, from intrepid circumnavigators through the cannon smoke of a pirate era to today's skyscraping cruise liners and steel-stacked container giants. A living timeline of humanity's ever-evolving life at sea. So here is the building for that one. And then finally, we have the conference center, and this kind of reminds me of one of the education buildings as well, with the whole red lines here. Fully booked throughout the year, the best venue to experience fan events, pop culture gatherings, musical performances, and technology conventions. Adds +3 attractiveness citywide and +10 well-being within 1 kilometer. I think this building looks super nice. If you look at it from the top down, it kind of looks like a bit of a bow tie as the walls kind of bow in here. There's little courtyards that do kind of give prison a little bit. However, the rooftop outdoor eatery little sections on the roof look really nice. It does look like a really nice building nonetheless. Now, next up are the 2 new industrial signature buildings. This one right here is the Fish and Chippery Seafood Factory. This seafood factory processes locally sourced fish into various food products such as canned fish, smoked fish, fish fillets, and sushi. It adds plus 10% industrial fish input efficiency citywide and plus 10% industrial fish hub efficiency citywide. Now, if we look at this building close up, it just looks like a conventional office building with a massive warehouse off the side. Definitely has some more unique architecture as well, but generally speaking, it is not super unique looking, and it looks just like a giant, massive factory really at the end of the day. This can allow it to fit perfectly into any of your industrial or office parks. Now, this next one requires us to travel over here to the coast, as this is the Seafarer Shipyard. All kinds of ships are built here, from cruise liners to cargo ships. Plus 2% industrial efficiency citywide, plus 5% export profit citywide, and plus 5% electronics production efficiency citywide. So they're making boats in here. I don't really know what a boat manufacturing facility looks like, so I can't really say how accurate it looks necessarily, but it looks really cool nonetheless. I love the shape of it. I like how it's not just like a generic like box. It actually has some angle to it as well. It seems like this is like the big building for like pushing the boat out or whatever. I really don't know much about boat construction, but this is a really cool building nonetheless. Also, all of the yellow can definitely be changed using recolor, I'm pretty sure, because when I've placed this building before, it was a different color. Much like a lot of the buildings inside of this pack, it is really utilizing whatever texture recolor can utilize. So if you want to change the color of a lot of the stuff in this pack, make sure you download the recolor mod. I'll leave a link to it down in the description. Now, I'm gonna leave all the buildings and props for last, and next up are our 8 new leisure piers. These are all under the Pathways tab. If we actually go to landscaping and piers and quays, they're going to be found in there. Now, first up are the narrow concrete leisure piers. The right one is with concrete pillars, and the left one here is with metal pillars. The metal pillar one also appears to have what looks to be vertical wooden railing, and they look like wood at least, and the right one here has more horizontal wooden railing. They also have different light bulbs, and the metal one does not have any benches, whereas the concrete one does. Now, this one isn't included in the actual dev diary that I was given, but right here is the narrow solid concrete leisure pier. Now, these actually do block the water, and if you were to delete these, the water would manipulate around it, so keep that in mind when you place these solid concrete ones. Now, there is a medium variation of both of those, and as you can see, the concrete pillar one definitely has more of the wooden aesthetic, whereas the metal one has more of the like concrete solid structure aesthetic. Again, no benches on this one, whereas this one has benches and trash cans. And then there's also the medium solid concrete one. And then the same thing can be said for the large side. So these are the wide versions of them. Now, the wide versions do not have benches or trash bins on them, but you can tell right here that this one is the concrete leisure pier with concrete pillars, and this is the one with metal pillars right here. And then we have the wide one that is for solid concrete, and this one feels a lot more like the piers that I guess I'm used to seeing that are solid and kind of jut out into the water. I think it'd be a really interesting idea if you maybe move it and sloped these down. You could almost make these into boat ramps. Maybe another cool idea for a way to utilize these. Now, obviously they wouldn't function that way, but just something interesting for our detailer friends. Now, I have all of these connected to quays as well, but you can just connect them up to a regular path along the coast as well. Now, we'll finally head over to the buildings and props. Let's start with the props first. There is quite a few new props added with this DLC. Now, the ones that they actually talk about in the dev diary are very specifically the industrial props. We have these 3 rope stacks added into the game, as well as these fish buckets. Now, these fishing net buckets have a lot of different variations, much like a lot of things, I keep saying it, in this pack have a lot of different variations. So some of them obviously have fish nets, and sometimes they're different colors and things like that. But these buckets right here are the ones referenced in the developer diary. These are the new industrial props that are added that anyone can place. However, if you do have a mod like Find It, for example, you can actually go in and access quite a few more new props. So we have access to all of these new, seating tables, these new benches, these new little like stalls for things like ice cream by the pier or something like that. We also have access to some of these more industrial buildings here if you want to help detail some of your areas. This is for our detailer friends over here. Again, you can access these using the Find It mod. There's also some new fences as well, some more industrial props as well, and then some of these have some color variations too to keep in mind. There's also some boat props. We have a ferry prop here, a fishing boat prop, a net fishing boat prop, an oil product tanker prop, and again, these are all prop versions of the tankers and ships that kind of drive around. We have our reach stacker prop, which again can be driving around, your small fishing boat, and your super tanker. Now, you might have seen these two in the trailer, but there's also these two new prop boats. They look super nice, and you can kind of place those around your piers if you want to make it look like a yacht docking club. The one on the left here is the sailing boat, and the one on the right is the yacht. There's also quite a few other props that you will find as well if you download Find It and sort by the DLC, but these are the ones I felt like were worth highlighting. Finally, let's take a look at the two new commercial zonable areas. On the right is the European, and on the left is the North American. These are the new low-density waterfront business zones. So there is 21 new buildings in varying shapes and sizes, and 63 assets in total when you take into consideration that there's level 1 and 2, level 3 and 4, and level 5 variations. Another really important thing to keep in mind here is that, as you can see from these buildings, this one's kind of pink and this one's kind of yellow, that they have a lot of different lot variation styles. I placed this building about 6 or 7 times and got a new variation every single time with new props every time I placed it. These buildings also look super nice. So this is the European side that we're currently looking at here. And I have them organized out, if you haven't seen my videos before, where we organize them out based on lot width and then going in order from depth from furthest or closest to the road, I guess, to the deepest. So we have our 2 deep right here. This is 3 deep. And then this is 4 deep for our 2 wide lots. And then that kind of goes all the way out as we go down. Some of these just kind of look like traditional commercial buildings, but some of them definitely fit the vibe of a very specific area. I think some of these ones, like these specifically right here, could work in a Southwest North American build as well. Some of them look like just your generic coastal building that you might find in Florida that maybe has like a travel agency connected to it. But as they level up, they begin to look a bit more upscale, where we have rooftop dining, for example. What I really appreciate is that this building also kind of right here looks like a strip mall asset, which is something that we don't really have a ton of necessarily inside of City Skylines. It's a lot of detached buildings, so I really appreciate the variety of a lot of these buildings inside of this pack. There's also some really unique buildings here. This one you can see is kind of curved around to fit on the corner. An important thing to note too is that there is a left and right variation and then a center variation of all of these lot sizes. So while the building structures might get a little repetitive, the color variations should help, and also the props as well, should help make a lot of this look quite different from one another. Now, if we look at the North American ones, they almost kind of look like repurposed homes or something like that, especially as we get into the middle tier right here. But they definitely give a very specific vibe that I am used to seeing maybe when I go to Florida to visit my aunt or something like that. They definitely fit the North American theme pretty well. Like this one just kind of looks like a modular home kind of transitioned into a commercial lot, which I actually think is really cool and interesting. Or it looks like one of those churches that you might see on the side of the road randomly. As we get to the upscale stuff, they do feel a bit more like that classic downtown vibe that we're kind of missing inside of City Skylines for North America. I know they teased that Old Town District thing that they were working on when they talked about bikes previously. Again, if you missed that video, you can take a look at it up on my annotations right now. And I'm really hoping that the North American buildings start to look like this. I don't think they showed off any of them, but this is the kind of vibe I'm really hoping that they give us. A lot of American towns have that classic boomtown look and feel and vibe, and we are just really missing buildings that look like that. And so I'm really happy that this pack actually has buildings that look like that, especially as we get up into the upper tier. But as we go through some of them, they do begin to look like maybe a Southwest vibe here with these concrete buildings. And there's definitely some unique shapes to this one as well. If we can see this like hard angle on this building here. This building reminds me of like an old Art Deco theater. And again, this pack has some pretty bright colors to it. As we can see, this entire building is bright pink. So if you don't like that, recolor might be your best friend. There's definitely something Florida-y about a lot of these buildings, but they definitely do feel like they would add to a coastal area. And I think they fit the idea that this is a waterfront business zone pretty well. Both can be said for both EU and North America. Now that we've kind of gone over all of the assets and buildings and functionality of everything that's included in the game, let's take a look at the 5 new maps that are added to the game. Okay, and here we are on the new game screen here, selecting a map. And on screen right now, you can see there are 5 new maps with the Bridges and Ports DLC icon next to them. Those maps are Driftwood Reach, Ribbon Isles, Lakeside Harbour, Sanctuary Bay, and finally, Verdant Vale. If we go back up to Driftwood Reach, we're gonna go through each map one by one. If you're not really that interested in the new maps, feel free to skip ahead using the chapters down below. Otherwise, we're gonna go through each map one by one here, starting with Driftwood Reach. As we can tell by the top-down image here, we can see that it is a massive peninsula, connected by just a tiny, narrow edge right here. Driftwood Reach. This peninsula is connected to the mainland only through a narrow strip of land. The surrounding water has minimal flow, posing challenges for water management. The terrain is relatively flat, with only a few elevated places. Some islands dot the coastline, and a large underwater oil deposit off the coasts offers opportunity for industrial interest. Now, of the new maps, Driftwood Reach has the second least amount of oil resource in the map. So keep that in mind if you want to build a bustling oil empire. This might not be the best one to do it on. However, all of them do have offshore oil in order to take advantage of the new stuff, as well as the fishing industry. All maps will have fishing because fish is based on the water depth. Now, the base theme for it is European. Its climate reaches 10 degrees Celsius up to 31 degrees Celsius, which means this is a warm map. It will never get below freezing. Now, it's also in the southern hemisphere, so remember that this map will also feature winter in June. Now, it has a buildable area of about 49%. It has all outside connections. It has access to all of the resources, as do all of the maps. Of all the new maps, it has the least amount of ore. Of all the new maps, this one has like the least amount of all of the resources. Like, it doesn't have the least of oil, but just generally speaking, it has a pretty low amount of resources overall. Okay, so here we are in the map. And you can see this is a huge flat piece of area right here. We can see that there's a little grid right here, kind of pre-made for us here at the end of this highway. It seems like a really nice, convenient, easy way to kind of start your city, especially because this map is so big and flat. I can see a lot of people making their city here. If we head over to the edge of the map, we can see that it's just a regular T interchange right here for the freeway, and there really isn't anything too spectacularly special about any of the outside connections or any of the roads really, or even the geological formations of this map. There's a couple little ridges, but otherwise, this map is incredibly flat. As we take a look here in the terrain view, there is definitely some sloping up over here, but it is kind of on the edge of the map. Otherwise, it's relatively flat and should be a really easy building experience. Now, first up, we're going to take a look here at the natural resources. And as we can see, this is the first time you guys will probably see the natural resources info view with fish available on the left-hand side here. And you'll see that the fish resource is out in the water. The water is almost highlighted exclusively blue, and that's showing off the fish population. I don't know if this is part of the new update or if this was in the game before, but now when you hover your cursor over top of specific areas, so if you hover over ore here or you hover over the fish population, it will tell you how much is actually in that area, with a max being 10,000 for said resource. If we look out on the water here, we can actually hold our cursor over the oil area and see that it is both oil and fish population. So that's really a neat thing to kind of see here, is that the resources do actually overlay on top of one another, and it tells you where they're overlaying. So if you really want to build a district somewhere and you think a resource might be overlaying on top of another, you can actually take a look. Now, unlike City Skylines 1, where the fish population and whatever DLC added the fish, I think maybe it was Sunset Harbor, I can't really remember which DLC added the fish. The fish amount and type was based on water flow intensity. In this game, it's based entirely on water depth, and there's only one fish type. So no salmon in this one, it is just fish, and it is based on water depth. So the more shallow the water, the less likely there is to be fish. There is also a renewal rate for fish, as you can see in the info view. So if you overfarm fish, it will take longer for that renewal rate to continue back. So as you fish, the fish will respawn slowly over time, unlike resources like oil, where that obviously is constantly depleting. So we can see that there's some pretty decent sized pockets of oil around the map, and everything kind of just looks speckled about, aside from the farmland, which does look like it falls into some more of the valleys or areas where you would think that maybe some fertile land might be. But otherwise, the ore definitely near the hilly areas, pretty trendy with maps, and the oil is just kind of speckled around. Next up, let's take a look at wind direction. Now the wind is spawning right about where my camera is. So right here off of the coast, off the side of this island right here is where the wind spawns. So keep in mind that your pollution, if you build industrial areas near the coast on this map, specifically this southern shoreline right here, that pollution will blow back inward towards the gap. So keep that in mind when planning your city on which direction the wind will blow. So the wind is spawning from over here, and all wind is blowing from that direction. Also, here's a look at the underground water deposits. As you can see here, they're just kind of speckled around as well. Also, just to show, here is the one boat connection. So this is the actual route that runs from outside the map to outside the map that all maps will obviously have for you to, kind of do your ports connections for all of your boats to get in and out of the map. So keep that in mind that this is where the base one is. I think you can obviously probably delete it and build it however you want, but this is how it's set up to start. Now, next up, we're gonna take one step down and go down to Ribbon Isles. In this vast expanse of stretching islands, nature's bounty thrives. Rich in both ore and oil, Ribbon Isles offers an abundant natural resources waiting to be tapped. Dramatic cliffs and small mountains overlook the islands, and the narrow waterways challenge even the most seasoned sea captain. This is also the European map theme. It gets down to -6°C, so this map will get below freezing. From now on, whenever I do these videos, I'm always going to do the maps in Celsius. I don't know if I used to do them in Fahrenheit before, but the overwhelming majority of the planet uses Celsius, and it doesn't make sense for me as an American to use Fahrenheit when most people know Celsius. And you know, if it's negative, it's below freezing, and if it's not, it's above freezing, and that's all people really care about in city skylines is if whether or not it's gonna get snow. So Celsius makes sense for doing these map videos. Now this map is also in the Southern Hemisphere, so we have 2 European maps in the Southern Hemisphere. This one does get below freezing, however. It has a 45% buildable area, has all outside connections. I find it interesting that this does say that the map is rich in both ore and oil, when in oil, it's about in the middle of the pack for the new maps, and in ore, it's actually the least or the second least amount of ore of all of the maps, at least of the new maps. Ribbon Isles does have the least amount of farmland, so also keep that in mind. So here we are in the Ribbon Isles, and let me tell you, for having 45% buildable area, this map looks like it can sustain a large amount of population, and I think is probably the core map of the 5 maps. It's flat, it has lots of islands, lots of opportunity for you to use the bridges, it's coastal, there's plenty of places for you to build things related to the ports DLC, and there's so many waterways through here for you to build cool networks for your boats to drive through. You could say one of the downsides of this map is that it starts off with only 2 outside connections for road, one over here and one over here, which means all of your traffic has to funnel through this way at the start, or from at least this highway. Now the rail and power does come in from this island, or I guess it's actually a peninsula, it's not really an island anyways. However, you could build an outside connection over here as well and kind of make all of that hook and connect back up and make it feel like it really is like a road kind of coming through there if you really want another outside connection. So that way all of your traffic isn't just funneled through that one side. Now there's this really nice bridge here built into the map. This is the Kingswood Bridge as it is labeled. However, this is the double train track truss arch bridge. And over here you can see them utilizing the 4-lane highway double train track double decked extra dosed bridge. I really hate this. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the bridge, it's the naming. They're such a mouthful. The asset is absolutely stunning and fits perfectly with the map. Now, if we go into transportation and we take a look at our water seaways over here, we have what looks to be one that wraps around from this side and carries it through over here, along with a smaller, more narrow seaway that goes back to this peninsula. However, this section does not have any seaways included inside of it right over here. As we can see right here, there is no seaways, so you can feel free to paint these however you want. Next up is the natural resources, and this map is really highlighting to me that as they've added the fish, it really makes the natural resource view look like you've dumped a bunch of melted crayons on the ground. So here we are. Here is the area, and you can see here there's oil and fish right here, overlaid on top of one another. Obviously, there is a ton of places for you to fish. Any spot with deep water will have fish, including this inland lake up over here if you wanted to do an inland fish farm of some kind. I don't know how you would set it up, but you could in theory do that. There's also just resources speckled about. Aside from the ore being obviously near the mountains, it doesn't really seem like there's any rhyme or reason to the placement of any of it, so just take that into consideration when picking this map. Next up, we'll highlight the underground water resource, which again is usually just kind of speckled around anyways, so here's where those locations are. And on top of that, we also have the wind direction. Now, the wind direction, I believe, is spawning over here on this hill right here, so keep that in mind that the wind is blowing from this corner, again, inland when you are building your industrial areas. So I would maybe not consider keeping this area to be your industrial area, as you're going to create a lot of pollution that will blow inland towards the rest of these islands. So maybe keeping your industrial area over on this island or somewhere over here might be better suited. Now, there are some really nice geographical formations on this map. As we go into the landscaping view, you can see that this has a really nice spidering effect coming down from the mountain. I really like how they've done at least the hills and mountains inside of the vanilla maps for this pack specifically. I feel like the vanilla maps were kind of underwhelming compared to a lot of the stuff that we've seen come out of the workshop. And while these are a little basic, we do have to keep in mind too that there are a lot of players who are not really interested in the craziness that some of us like inside of the workshop. They want boringer, more flatter maps to build expansive cities on, and they don't really want to deal with the terrain that much. And I think that is probably best for the base game maps. However, when there are mountains, I'm really appreciative of the fact that they've kind of done a little bit more in creating more unique and nice, almost realistic looking hills along these mountains now compared to some of the other vanilla maps. A couple of these islands will have these bluffs, and I think they look absolutely fantastic. Next up is Lakeside Harbour, a beautiful landscape between two Great Lakes and ridges rich in natural resources. The lakes are connected with streaming river, which leaves plenty of options connecting the two sides. The Great Lakes provide long strides of shoreline where gleaming harbors can be built. Now, the theme is North American, and the climate gets to minus 15 degrees Celsius up to 26 degrees Celsius. When I first saw this map, it made me feel like it was inspired by Michigan, once again, bringing it up, mostly because they're referring to this as Great Lakes. It's in North America, and there's radical temperature change here, which are all very common here in Michigan. However, the mountains that exist in this map, as you can see from the preview image, are definitely not very Michigan. We do have the Porcupine Mountains, which are some of the oldest mountains on Earth. However, they've been eroded down from centuries and centuries, along with glacial erosion. So, while places like the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, notably a town like Houghton that's split in half by a river between the two sides of Lake Superior, which is very similar to this map, they don't really have the mountains like this. So maybe they're an inspiration for it, but still really interesting nonetheless. This map has every single outside connection, and it also has the most lumber of all of the new maps. And of all the new maps, it also has the most oil. Aside from the farming resource, it has top 2 of every single resource. So this map is plentiful in resources. However, what it has in resources, it doesn't make up for in buildable areas. It's only 26%. So while it's really rich in all of this stuff, good luck building on it. So here we are in the map, and as you can see, there isn't a ton of buildable land. You can obviously see these mountainous ridge lines here, and as we look out across the map here, you can actually take a look and see all of the mountains around this area. So it's definitely a really mountainous place. Much like the previous map, the mountains definitely look a lot better than most of the vanilla maps, and you can see it's incredibly forested. Now, the starting area has a nice little grid to it, but you can see that there is this nice little unique like roundabout interchange here with a sunken highway. Definitely one of the more unique interchanges on the vanilla maps. Now, there's actually 3 outside connections. There is a highway that goes through a tunnel out over this way. There's another highway that goes out this direction. And over here is a 2-lane highway that follows the mountains out of the map. There's also a couple of islands around this area as well. They seem relatively flat as we go into the landscaping tool. You can see most of them are flat, aside from this island out over here, which definitely has a pretty decent size hill to it, along with the side of this bigger island out over here and this smaller island. Otherwise, the rest of the inland area is relatively flat. So this area that does exist inside of the mountains here that you could build on is buildable. It's really flat, and you definitely won't have to deal with too much sloping, or you could flatten most of it yourself if you really wanted to. Now, if we take a look at the rest of the outside connections, specifically the boat ones, this side with that bigger island definitely has a boat connection to it. However, this other side does as well, but they don't connect up. You can see that there is a path for them to kind of swing in, but through this canal section here, or maybe delta section is a better word, there's really no connection made already. So if you want to have some boats come through here, you'll have to draw that line yourself. And be careful because some of this does get a little narrow, and you want to make sure that that water is deep enough for these boats. However, this might be a perfect area to build a ton of drawbridges, which would be really cool. Now that we get into the resource view here, you might remember me saying that this map has the least amount of farming natural resource. However, as we can see, it's all in the spaces that you need it to be. It's in all of the flat land as it is. So if you do want to take advantage of farming here, you can still do it pretty easily, even though it has the least amount of that resource. And while there's a lot of ore on this map, it is almost exclusively in these mountains. So it is kind of a challenge to actually access that ore. The oil, however, is sprinkled throughout, and you can see it's in the water, but it's also on these islands over here too. So there is a lot of places for you to go out and access this oil. The fish population is obviously throughout the entirety of the ocean. As long as the water is deep, you'll have fish. Next up is wind direction, and the wind actually spawns right here from this mountain. So as you can see, all of the arrows kind of speed out from this point. So keep that in mind when building your industrial areas, that you might want to build them out actually towards this coast rather than over here. Because if you build them over here, they might blow into some residential areas you build over here. So make sure that you're keeping that into consideration when building your city. You can also build them over here and feel very safe and comfortable knowing that on this side of the mountain ridgeline, none of this pollution will blow into your residential areas. Finally are the inland water deposits. So if you don't want to take water from the Great Lakes, you could take them from in the ground. And there is quite a few deposits, but since this is the Great Lakes, you can always keep that in mind, that you can always just suck the water up and know that it's clean, safe drinking water. However, do keep in mind that it looks like the water flows from this side to this side. So if you're dumping your sewage directly into the water, keep in mind that it does seem to want to flow out this way. Next up is Sanctuary Bay. A large bay with scattered islands form a mesmerizing formation of beaches and peninsulas. Towering cliffs hold the ore and oil, while the flat center of land hosts a large forest and fertile areas. Together, these provide an amplitude of riches for the city to grow on. The highways and train tracks create an easy access to the outside world. Now, of all of the new maps, this map has the most ore and the most fertile land. It also has the second most oil. So this might be a resource hotspot for you to build your next city. It's in the European theme, and it gets down to -15 Celsius. It roughly has the same climate as the previous map. It's in the northern hemisphere, and it has 43% buildable area, so quite a bit more than the previous map as well. It has all outside connections too. And as we can see from the overview, there's not as many mountains stopping you from building here. However, a lot of the map is broken up into these islands. So let's take a look at it. Okay, so here we are inside of the map. And as you can see, a lot of this map is broken up into these islands. However, over here to the right, you'll notice that there is quite a bit of flat area, and there's definitely some areas in and throughout where you can make some pocket communities or areas to actually have some specific industries as well. There's also two separate road networks on this map. So over on this side, there is a 4-lane two-way highway that goes down into a 2-lane two-way highway through here as well, and then it kind of expands up thinking that you're going to build something out this direction, so it's giving you the idea, as well as the rail line that kind of just comes back up over here around this mountain. However, on the other side, you'll notice that there is some other connections. So we have this one that kind of comes down over this way, which is a 4-lane two-way highway that ends up meeting up with that double-decked bridge with the train here. So there's also another train line that wraps around. Over here, we have that same kind of interchange with an overpass over top of it. And then over here on this peninsula is your actual starting plot. There's honestly quite a bit of infrastructure in this map. We have some different train routes going out this direction, and then over here you'll notice that the highway kind of comes out over here, and it seems like they're trying to hint that you should maybe build a little pocket community over here, or at least start the next expansion of your city maybe out over this direction. You can see here too that it wraps around the mountain and ends up over here. And if we go back to the other side, this is kind of the main route in and out, as it's like two-lane, two-way highways, you know. This area is also incredibly flat over here. If we take a look at the terrain height, this is also super flat. Like, you can easily build a nice sprawling city kind of from the start over here and then expand outwards. So if that's something that you want to do, it really makes sense to do it from here. That probably makes sense, but the main outside connection comes from the ocean side, I guess, over here. So the boats will come through, and then there is a path kind of leading in already for you. But you can easily spin some boats in throughout here if you really wanted to. However, it does look like from the extra map area that these lakes kind of just end. So maybe building bigger ship routes up towards that way logically doesn't make a ton of sense. However, you could do it just for aesthetic reasons. Next up, when we take a look at our natural resources, you'll notice that the fish view is starting to take a little bit of a spotty approach, as we notice that the water here is not as deep as it is everywhere else. So we'll see the fish resource start to go down. I actually ended up not opening the info view right, so if we go in here, you can see that the fish resource is not as plentiful in this area. So do keep that in mind, that the fish population is going to be way more intense out over here where the oil industry is. However, as we know from the dev diary, the oil industry will actually scare away fish, so you will have to pick and choose which one you're really relying on out over here. Thankfully, there is a lot of other places where you can get oil from inside of the water, so if you do want to take a dive into the oil industry, you can do that in other spots and leave this area for fishing. You can also see that this flat area is just filled with land fertility, so you can build lots of farms, and the hills are filled with ore. Now, from this mountainous corner is actually where the wind direction is coming from. So building your industrial area out towards the coast over here, where you probably will have your harbor anyways, seems like a really logical place. I think of all of the maps, while this has its geographical challenges in terms of these islands, it might be one of the more logistically easy maps to start on. Finally, here's a look at all of the inland water resource. So if you want to just dump all your pollution into the water, you could take advantage of the in-ground water. So here's all the resources, and this one's pretty close to your starting tile, as well as this one, so you should be able to really easily take advantage of that. Finally, the last new map is Verdant Vale. A long, wide serpentine river runs across the flat vale. River and the coast are pebbled with small islands where creativity can thrive. The area is lush with resources and has accessible outside connections. This map actually has the least amount of oil of all of the new maps, so keep that in mind. Now, this map is in the Northern Hemisphere and meets the North American theme. However, this map does not get below freezing, and it gets up to 30 degrees Celsius. This is also the first map of the new maps that doesn't just have the sunshine next to it for the climate symbol, it also has rain, so this map will be a little bit more tropical than many of the other maps. It has a 63% buildable area and all outside connections. Okay, so here we are. Immediately this map is kind of giving like mountainous Louisiana in a way. I mean, you have this nice little cool delta here at the end. You know, it is tropical, it is rainy, and you have this huge delta down over here. That's just kind of the vibe I'm kind of feeling. It's also flat and lowland. I imagine if a hurricane hit this, it would all flood out. So it's giving Louisiana a little bit in a way. We can also see this map is incredibly flat. Like, I barely see any terrain changes. If you're looking for a large sprawling map with just a little bit of variety to it and maybe some islands for you to build like a park on or something like that, this might be the perfect map for you. You start relatively close to the water, but you will have to buy your way out to the coast if you really want to access these coastal areas. And if we access the actual terrain info view, it is just as flat as it can be. Now, the coastline does slope down, so you will have to take that into consideration, that there is this sloping down effect as we get down to the coast. So just be mindful of that when you're building. Now, there is definitely some terrain changes. This looks like an old riverbed right here. I really appreciate this little touch that the map maker from Colossal Order actually put into this map, where it looks like there was an old loop here that the river decided it didn't want to use anymore. I think that is a really, really, really nice touch. A lot of you guys may wonder why a lot of these vanilla maps are a little bit more basic and boring. A lot of it has to do with ease of access, but another thing has to do with performance. The less they put into these maps, the less intricate and detailed that they are, the better and more likely they are to run on the console version of the game or on lower end hardware for people. So the vanilla maps need to be accessible by everybody. And that's why the workshop exists. Now, there's 3 access points for your highways to get in and out of the map. There's one up over here, one down to the right, and one down to the left. There's also a rail line that comes through here and exits on both of the connection points. However, there's also another rail line on the north side of the map, so keep that in mind. If you want to have multiple rail connections, you can do that. And if it didn't seem obvious, obviously the boat connection is just kind of out here towards the ocean. Now next up is the natural resources, and this one, it does take a little bit more of an interesting twist here, as the fertile land is almost exclusively on this side of the river. So there is some fertile land over here and over here, but there's a huge swath of area to build a cool little farming area on the left side of this map, I guess, if we're looking inland from shore. The ore is obviously just kind of speckled around. There are definitely some places where it seems intentionally placed, but that's how it is. And the fishing area, again, is just mostly and exclusively set on water depth. So it's mostly just based on this is deep water here and this is deep water here, obviously. I think this map had a really cool opportunity to maybe do some offshore drilling, so you can also do that over here, but do keep in mind that the oil pockets are not as big maybe as some other maps. Also, your wind spawn is right about here where my cursor is, so keep that in mind that the winds are blowing in from the ocean instead of out to the ocean. So if you build your industry by the water here, the wind's actually gonna blow out this way, but if you build it over here where the wind spawner is, it's all gonna blow in towards this farmland. So just really be mindful, especially on this map, of where your wind direction actually is. Because of how this is placed, it can get really weird really quickly. Finally is your inland water resource, and as we can see, that little horseshoe bend from the river has a bit of intentionally placed groundwater. I really like that. I think there's a lot of unique, interesting elements to this map. It seems really basic on the surface, but I'm actually a fan of this one and the little details and the intent put into making this map. But you can see here that a lot of this seems to be like maybe where some old riverbeds were, which I really like. I don't know, I'm a big fan of it. I'm smiling and giggling at it. There's also 6 new achievements, and much like City Skylines 1, when there's a new content update, there's also a new What's New panel when you boot up the game. Helps give you a little bit of information about the new update that you just purchased or added to your game. And that right there is everything included in the new Bridges and Ports DLC. Now, I asked it at the top of the video, but I'm also gonna ask it and remind you guys here at the end. Throughout this video, you may have been inspired to think of new DLCs for City Skylines 2. Let me know down in the comments, specifically in a reply to my pinned comment, what DLC you want to see next. Paradox does read our comments across YouTube, so even they might be inspired by something you say. Or see an abundance of people asking for something like a Parks DLC and try to prioritize that next. Hopefully after the asset editor and bikes are added to the game. All right, this is a pretty long video, so I'll let you guys get on with your day. I've been Kodiak the Kodiak, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Deuces.